I've got a hungry little birdie here who's waiting on his breakfast, so I'm going to show you guys what I do in the morning at this point. First, we'll start with the water, of course. So I use filtered water for him. Any kind of water that you also drink is fine for your birds. So, as long as it's not flavored or something. But if you drink tap water, then your birds are probably fine drinking tap water. If you drink bottled water, then your birds should be drinking bottled water. You know, whatever you drink is whatever your birds should have, because chances are you drink the highest quality water available to you. So, there's his water. Right now, we are converting him over to a Sprouts diet. So first thing in the morning, well, not a Sprouts diet. We're converting him to eating Sprouts as opposed to just dry seed, because he came home to us eating dry seed. That's not very healthy. We tried for 4 months to get him to eat pellets. We're not giving up. We're still going to try to get him to eat pellets. But in the meantime, I would rather give him what is essentially diet seed, in my opinion, which is Sprouts. I would rather him eat Sprouts while we're trying to get him to convert over to pellets than try to get him eating pellets while he's still eating this really fattening seed. So here are his Sprouts. You can see that they all have little tails. This is just his normal seed mix that I took and sprouted. I give him about 3 tablespoons of that, which I know is kind of a lot considering he's not going to eat most of it, but it's just, you know, what I like to do. I think he's more likely to try it if there's a lot of it. But that's just my personal opinion and my personal observation of my birds. So then I add about a tablespoon of this other mix that I made from bulk grains and things from Whole Foods. So this one contains several different kinds of beans. It contains grains. It has all sorts of really good stuff. And I think you're about to have a little bird visitor here who's trying to get to his breakfast. So excuse that. But first thing in the morning, the Sprouts is all I offer him. I offer it to him for about 20 minutes. And then after that, if I notice that he hasn't really eaten enough, I will give him a little teaspoon or so of dry seed to get him started. And usually after that, he will eat enough of it to keep himself full. If during diet conversion you ever notice that your bird is having watery droppings, that's a pretty good indicator that they may not be eating enough. And you definitely need to feed them more. So over time, I have kind of carefully balanced how much he needs to eat in order to not have those watery droppings and to keep his weight up. So I very carefully make sure that even though I'm kind of making him just hungry enough to eat the new foods, that I'm not starving him. You should never, ever starve your bird for any reason, unless a vet tells you to for medical purposes. But that will likely almost never happen. It's not very good to have hungry birds on your hands. So at this point, I start adding some pellets to the other bowl. If you notice, the other bowl is shiny. And that bowl is shinier than the bowl that I put the Sprouts in. He's more inclined to eat the Sprouts because they look like seeds. He's not very inclined to eat the pellets because at this point he's still convinced that the pellets are just a shredder toy. I've tried mixing them in with the Sprouts. I've tried making a mash out of them. I've tried hand feeding them to him. I've tried so many different methods. Right now we're trying the mirror method. And if you're doing the mirror method, please be very careful not to leave the mirror with your bird for extended periods of time, because mirrors have a tendency to not be very good for them. But yeah, we've tried a bunch of different methods, and so far he still thinks that they're just shredder toys. So what I've decided now to avoid food waste and food spoilage and all that jazz is I'm just putting the dry pellets in this extra shiny bowl, and that extra shiny bowl is going to go in a higher area of the cage that he likes to hang out in. So that way, if he gets a little hungry or he's a little curious or whatever, the pellets are easily available right there for him to try one. So that, I find, has him picking at the pellets more than mixing them in with his food, and more than keeping the pellet food dish at the same level. But I've only been trying that method for about 3 or 4 days now, so I won't know for sure. But as soon as I find a method that successfully converts him over to pellets, I'll let you know. So right now, because he's converting to pellets, I have several different kinds that I mixed together. We have tried so many different pellet brands and styles and whatever. And I will go over with you which ones are in here so that you're familiar. In this particular batch, we've got Tops Premium Pellets. These are non-GMO, organic, cold processed pellets. They're extremely healthy. They're free of the allergens that cockatoos are notoriously allergic to, such as corn and red food dye. I don't know whether or not my bird has any of those allergies, but I kind of would prefer not to find out. So the Tops is my #1 choice of pellet for him to eat. But of course, I'm going to let him sample around and see which pellet he would prefer to eat, because I'd rather him eat any pellet than no pellets at all. Here we have Zoopreme Natural. So that one is by Zoopreme. It has a lot of sugar and a lot of millet in it. So it's not my favorite one, but I have a feeling that he's more likely to convert to that pellet than he is anything else, because it has a lot of sugar and a lot of millet. But of course, he proves me wrong by picking up a Tops pellet first. I'm going to move his water so he doesn't get it dirty. In there, you see some little itty-bitty colorful pellets. Those are Zoopreme fruit blends, but it's the canary size, and the reason that those are in there is because the formula is exactly the same as a regular Cockatiel size Zoopreme fruit blend. I know, you're mad because it's not seed. And because it's exactly the same formula, it's perfectly safe for me to give him that size. It's really the same thing, just a little bit smaller. And I noticed one day that when I was giving the canaries some of that, before I had converted them to a dye-free pellet, he was eating some of their pellets out of their dish in the morning as I was filling their dishes up. So I figured if he wanted to eat them out of their dish, maybe if I added some of these in here, he would start eating them. That didn't happen, but I think it's still worth a shot. Then there are some pellets that are almost the same size as the Zoopreme fruit blend for canaries, and that is Harrison's Fine. That's another brand that I would love for him to eat if he were into it, but personally I think Tops is better. So that's still the one that I would prefer he eat, but I would be happy as a clam if he ate the Harrison's. And then lastly, we have the Lafferburg parakeet pellets. And these guys, those are the same thing as the Lafferburg canary pellets. And I noticed that he was also eating those out of my canary's food dish after I converted them over to that because it was dye-free. Are you trying to get to your sprouts? So I got him the parakeet version, and that was like before I realized that it was okay for him to eat the canaries version. So I noticed that he was eating the Lafeber canary pellets out of the canaries dishes once I converted them to that. I converted them to that because it's dye-free. And I figured I would get him the same kind in the parakeet version because I shop on DoctorsFostersmith.com a lot, and I needed something to bring my my balance up. And since it's practically the same size as the canary version and it's practically the same formula, I figured I would just pick some of that up, and whenever the canaries ran out of theirs, I would maybe mix some of his in or whatever to bridge that gap. But yeah, so those are the different foods that he has access to. After he has finished eating his sprouts in the morning, usually I reserve his dry seeds for training, and I just make sure to give him quite a few of those during training so that he doesn't get those watery, I haven't eaten enough droppings that I was mentioning earlier. And yeah, I find that for the sprouts, he's still very, very, very interested in the sprouted millet as opposed to anything else in there. But I'm hoping over time he will grab the end of a sprout of a different kind, thinking it's millet, eat it, realize that he likes it, and continue eating it, you know? What's nice about the sprouts is that eventually what you can do once they're reliably eating sprouts and several different kinds of sprouts, unlike just the millet like Taki here, you can finely mince vegetables. That's called chop. Finely mince vegetables so that they're itty bitty, like the size of Harrison's fine, and you sprinkle them on top of the sprouts. And what happens is that the vegetables are wet and the sprouts are wet, so the vegetables stick to the sprouts. And while trying to eat the sprouts, your bird will accidentally eat the chop, or at the very least taste it if they're very good at separating their foods. And that kind of helps introduce them to different vegetables and get them used to eating those. So I will be adding chop at some point. But I'd like to get him to a point where he's eating more than just the sprouted millet before I do that. This little guy doesn't even really like sunflowers. And sunflower seeds are something that most people have issues with getting their cockatiel to not eat. But he is so picky that he won't eat his sunflower seeds and he won't eat his safflower seeds. And both of those are like close seconds to millet for birds. So until he's broadening his tastes a little bit, I'm not going to overwhelm him by adding chop on top. I just want to get him used to eating the sprouts. And once he's used to eating the sprouts, I'll add chop. And once he's on sprouts and chop, then maybe I'll start mixing some pellets in. And, you know, after that, hopefully he'll start making that conversion, or he'll at least get good enough nutrition with the sprouts and the chop that it's not a huge deal that he doesn't eat any pellets. So, yeah. Thank you for listening. Catch you guys later.